We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 59a. This daf is sponsored by Sean Kashani. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amud or a daf, please see the description box below. And please see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah was discussing a person tells his friend to be Mekadesh a woman, and then the friend goes along, and instead of being Mekadesh the woman for the person who sent him, he's Mekadesh the woman for himself. And the Mishnah said that the Kiddushin works for the second individual. And the Gemara is now focusing on the language of the Mishnah. The language of the Mishnah was Ha'omer l'chaveiro, if one says to his friend. And so the Gemara now asks, Umay Shnahasam, what's the difference over there? It's referring to the second parak, to Katani, because it says in the Mishnah in the second parak, Ha'omer l'shlucho, the language is that a person tells his shliach, instead of using the language that he says to his friend, it says that he says to his shliach. So why is it that it uses a different language over here? And Rashi explains, Umay Shnahasam b'perek ish mekadesh, what's the difference over there in perek ish mekadesh, the second parak? To Katani, Ha'omer l'shlucho, it says over there, a person says to his shliach, say v'kadesh li isha plonis b'makom ploni. He says, go be mekadesh for me a woman, such and such a woman in such and such a place. V'halach v'kidsha b'makom acher. He goes ahead, the shliach goes, and he's mekadesh of that woman, but it's in a different place. So it says over there, eina mekudeshes. It says it's not a good kiddushin over there. And so Rashi explains the Gemara, Ma'ishna hasam denakat lashon shlichus. Why is it that over there the language that is used is a language of shlichus, sheshalchu l'shem kach, that he sent him with this purpose? V'hacha nakat chaveiro, and here it says the word chaveiro, shelo shalchu l'shem kach. There it doesn't sound like he sent him for that purpose. Elim yizdamin lo b'makom ploni derech etzla. It almost sounds like in our Mishnah, if it happens to be that you find her, so then be mekadesh her to me. And so why is it again that we use a different language in the two Mishnayos? And the Gemara continues and answers, Hacha ribusa kamash molon v'hasam ribusa kamash molon. Over here the Mishnah is teaching us a Chiddush, and over there the Mishnah is teaching us a Chiddush. Hacha ribusa kamash molon, here the Mishnah is teaching us a Chiddush. The Itana shalucho, because if it said in the Mishnah over here that he sent the shliach, he sent him for that specific purpose. So havamina, so then I would have thought shluchohu to have a ramai. In a situation of a shliach, that's already a situation where the person is considered deceitful if he goes ahead and he's mekadesh the woman for himself instead of for the person who sent him. The samcha daite, because the person's relying on him. Savar avid li shlichus, he thinks the person's going to do my shlichus, he'll do what I need. Avol chaveiro, but let's say he sends just his friend and he says if it happens to be, so then the lo samcha daite, he's not really relying on that. So emalola have a rama, I might think he's not considered a rama in that case, and so therefore that's the chiddush. We're saying even in a situation of chaveiro, he's considered to be deceitful. And the Gemara continues, Hasam over there in the second parak, Ribusa Kamash Malon. There also the Mishnah is teaching us a Chiddush, the Itana Homer L'Chaveiro, because if the case over there was, he said to his friend to be Mekadesh the woman in such and such a place, Havamina Chaveiro Hu Dechikitsha B'Makom Achreina Mekudeshes. I would think that if he sent his friend, meaning it wasn't such a specific shlichus, such a specific mission, so there if he's Mekadesh or in a different place, it's not a good Kiddushin. The Savar Lo Tarach, because he thinks to himself, he's not really going to take the bother. He's not going to try to find her in some other location. Aval shlucha, but if he sends somebody that he's appointing specifically as his shliach, specifically as his messenger, to Tarach, where over there already the shliach is going to take effort, he's going to try to find her, so there I might say, Ema Mara Makom Hulo, I might think that when he said, he specified a location, he was just pointing him in a direction, but it didn't have to be that specific place. I might think that's the case, Kamash Molon, so that's what the Mishnah in the second parak teaches us, that even if it's a shliach, even in that situation, he is makbid that it be in that specific place, and not in a different place. And Rashi explains, the Savar Hai Mishaleach Lo Tarach Hai Shliach Levak Shali B'Makom Acher, because the Mishaleach thinks the Shliach is not going to look for in a different place. V'lo Samcha Daiti L'Shav Yishliach Elaboso Makom. So in that situation where it's just Chavero, so he's not relying on him except for that specific place. But I might think by a Shliach, so Mara Makom Hulo, maybe by a real Shliach, he was just pointing him in a direction, but any place might be good. Im Timsena Sham Kachena Li Sham, if you find her over there, be Mekadesh her to me over there. Ve'ena Matricha Chol Makom Acher. I'm not going to burden you to go somewhere else. But nevertheless, if he does it, you would say it's a good Kiddushin, even if it's in a different location. And that's why the Mishnah teaches us, no, even in a situation of a real Shliach, it's not going to be good if it's in a different location. And the Gemara continues, Ravin Chasida Azul Kedusha Le'itasol Livrei. Ravin Chasida, he went to be Mekadesh a woman to his son. kitchel and nafshe, but in the end he found the woman, he was mekadesh her to himself instead of to his son. And so the Gemara asks, Vatanya, but didn't we learn in the Brisa we quoted above, Masha Asa Asi, that when the Shliach does that, so it is an effective Kiddushin, the Kiddushin that the Shliach has to himself actually works, Elishanagbo Minagramos, but that's considered to be a deceitful practice. So how could it be that Rav and Chasida would do this, that he'd be Mekadesh the woman to himself? Again, that seems to be a deceitful practice. And the Gemara answers to that, Lo Yahavua Nihile. The Gemara says that the individuals who were giving this woman over for Kiddushin, they wouldn't give her over to his son, and therefore that was already an impossibility, and that's why he was just Mekadesh her himself. But the Gemara says, Iboyle lo odoi, but at the very least, Iboyle lo odoi, he should let his son know what's going on before he goes ahead and does this. And the Gemara says, no, Savar, he thought to himself, Adahachi vachi, that in the meantime, Asa inish achrina mekadesh la, someone else is going to come and be mekadesh her. There wasn't time to do that, and so therefore that's why Rav and Chasida did not do so. And Rashi explains, Lo yahavu nehile lo rotzu litnu letzorch beno. They didn't want to give this girl over to his son. Umakshinani boyle lo dui. At least he should let him know lahotzi atzmam in minag ramos. That way, at least he's not going to act deceitfully. And again, the Gemara says there was no time for him to do that. And the Gemara continues, Rabba bar bar Chana yoev lezuze l'Rav. Rabba bar bar Chana gave money to Rav. Omar, he said, Zavno nehile lahayara. Go use this money to purchase this particular land for me. Azal zavna l'nafshe. So Rav went and he bought it for himself. And the Gemara asks the same question, Vatanya, but then we learn in a Brisa, Masha asa asa elishanag bo minagramos, that what's done is done, but he's acted deceitfully. How could Rav act deceitfully? And the Gemara answers, Baga dali mehave. The Gemara says this was actually a piece of property. It was a valley that belonged to strong individuals. As Rashi says, Baga dali me bika shal bale zroa haisa. This was a valley that belonged to strong individuals. V'lo yanichu l'chol adam liknos karka etzlam. They wouldn't allow just anyone to buy property next to them. And so therefore, as the Gemara explains, l'Rav nahagi be'kavod, l'Rav bar bar Chana lo nahagi be'kavod. To Rav, they would give such an honor, they would allow him to buy it, but they weren't going to allow Rav bar bar Chana to buy it, and therefore, since it was impossible to buy it for Rav bar bar Chana, he bought it for himself. But the Gemara continues again along the same lines as above, Iboyle lo odoi, but at least he should have let him know what he was doing. And the Gemara says, Savar, he thought to himself, Adahachi vachi, that in the meantime, Asa inish achrina zavin, that somebody else is going to come along and he's going to buy it, and that's why Rav bought it for himself. And the Gemara continues, Rav Gidl have a mahapich ba'yara. Rav Gidl, he was trying to buy a particular piece of property. Azal Rabbi Abba zavnan. Rabbi Abba came along and he purchased it. Azal Rav Gidl kiblei Rabbi Zeira. Then Rav Gidl came and he complained to Rabbi Zeira about what happened, that Rabbi Abba took this property that he was trying to buy. Azal Rabbi Zeira v'kiblei Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Rabbi Zeira came and he took the complaint over to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Amar Lei said to him, Hamtein at sheyala etzleinu l'regel. Let's wait until he comes to us for the regel, and at that point in time, we'll be able to speak to him. Kisalik, when he came up, Ashkechei, he found him. Amar Le, he said, Ani mahapech b'charora. He said to him the following case: what happens if you have an ani, you have a poor person who's trying to get a charora, he's trying to get a piece of food, a cake from which is hefker, he's trying to get it from hefker, uba'acher v'not lahimenu, and then somebody else comes along and takes it from him, he snatches it from him. What's the halacha in such a situation by ani mahapech b'charora? So Amar Le, so he said to him, again, this is Rabbi Abba saying back, he says, Nikra Rasha, such a person is considered to be a Rasha. If a person takes something away from an ani that's mahapich b'charara, that's considered to be something that is deceitful, that is wrong. And so then the Gemara continues, V'yela mar my time of it hachi. So then he said to him, well, if that's the case, so why did the master do that? Why did you, Rabbi Abba, take that property away when Rav Gidl was trying to get that property? So Amar Le said to him, Lo havi yadan, I didn't know that. I wasn't aware that he was trying to get the property. And the Gemara says, Hashtanami, Neisva Nehile Mar. So he said, if that's the case, now also you should give it to him. Amar Le, so he said to him, Zvune lo mizavnina la. I don't want to sell the property to him. Diara kamaisi, because it's the first piece of property that I've bought. Velo misamna mils, it's not a good siman. Rashi says it's not a siman tov that a person should sell the first thing he buys. Iboy v'matona nishkali, but if he wants, he could take it as a gift. I'll give it to him as a gift. It wouldn't be a good omen for me to sell it, but I'll give it to him. And the Gemara continues and says, Rav Gidel lo nachisla. Rav Gidel, nevertheless, even though it was offered to him as a gift, he didn't take the property, techsiv, because it's written in the pasuk, v'sonei matanos yichas, somebody who hates gifts, he will live. He didn't want to accept a gift. And Rabbi Abba also, lo nachisla. Rabbi Abba also wouldn't go down to the property, mishum dehafich bar Rav Gidel, because Rav Gidel had pursued the property. Rabbi Abba didn't feel appropriate to be using that property. Lo mar nachisla, v'lo mar nachisla. This master didn't take it. This master didn't take it. Umeskaria ara de Rabbanan, so it was called the land of the Rabbanan. It ended up being essentially like a hefker piece of property that was used by the scholars. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "V'chein ha'omer li'isha yeskachi li v'chudu." Let's say a person says to a woman, "Be mekudeshes to me after 30 days," and then someone else comes along and is mekadesh her within the 30 days. So the Mishnah said she's mekudeshes to the second man. And the Gemara says, "Lo ba'achar v'kitcha b'soch shloshim mahu." What would be? Let's say a second person does not come. Nobody's mekadesh her within that 30 days. So what is the halacha? And the Gemara says, Rav Shmuel da'armi tarvayu, Rav and Shmuel both say mekudeshes, it's a good kiddushin, meaning to say after 30 days it's going to be a kiddushin. V'afal pishin esachlu hamos, and even though the money is no longer around at the end of the 30 days, it is still going to be a good kiddushin. And the Gemara says, my taima, what's the reason for this? Hani zuze, this money that was given, lo lemilva damu v'lo lepikadon damu. It's not similar to a loan, and it's also not similar to a deposit. Lepikadon lo damu, it's not similar to a deposit. Pikadon birashusa demara kamesachli, because a pikadon, let's say a pikadon is consumed, let's say it's destroyed, so that's considered the original owner's loss. It's being destroyed in his possession. Vahani, but over here, this money, birashusa dida kamesachli, it's actually being consumed, it's already in her rishus. He gave it over, it's fully in her rishus. But lemilva nami lo dama, but it's also not similar to a loan, because milva lahotsa nitana, because a loan is given, it's meant to be spent. But hani, but when it comes to this money that was given to her, betoras kiddushin yahavinu nihila, it was given to her betoras kiddushin, it was given to her for the purposes of kiddushin. And Rashi explains, V'afa bishen esachlu hamos, even though the money has been consumed, besoch lamed yom, within the 30 days, techibo kiddushin lemechal, because at the time that the kiddushin is supposed to be chal, lesnayu lemos, the money's not around anymore. Afilu achi chayli, nevertheless, it's going to be chal. Lav lemil v'damo, it's not like a loan. The name of hamakadesh b'mil ve'ena mekudeshes. If it was like a loan, a person can say that if a person tries to be mekadesh with a loan by forgiving a loan, that's not a good kiddushin. V'lav lepikadon damo, it's also not similar to a pikadon. The name im lo nishtayir b'shava pruta, because if it was a pikadon, if it was a deposit, and then a person says, the man says to the woman, keep the pikadon, and that's for kiddushin purposes. If the pikadon is not remaining anymore, if there's no longer a shava pruta remaining of the pikadon, eina mekudeshes, that's also not a good kiddushin. Kedamar b'yish mekadesh, that's what it says in the second parak. Iskad sheli b'pikadon v'halchum, it's also shenignav o shenevad. It says if he says be mekudeshes to me with the pikadon, she goes and she finds it was already stolen or lost. Im nishtayir bo shava pruta mekudeshes v'chulu. Only if there remains a shava pruta is it a good kiddushin. Lohotzah nitana, again we said that the loan is meant to be spent. Mekame denischali kiddushin, meaning when a person lends money, it's supposed to be spent before the kiddushin is ever going to be chal. V'chiyamar lo hiskadshi liba, if he says be mekudeshes to me with the loan, lavdi dei, it's not his anymore, it's already given. V'lav midi yoivla, he's not giving her anything. Avalelu lo nitanu lo lahotzian, but over here, the money wasn't given to be spent. El al manasha tiskadish ben, it was given on the understanding that it was for kiddushin purposes. Ulachi ki achlan, therefore, if she does consume that money, the da achla, she's consuming her own money. Ulachi mata zimna mekudeshes, and when the time comes, so it's going to be a good kiddushin again, as we said. And the Gemara continues, Lo ba'acher v'kitcha, let's say a second person doesn't come, nobody's mekadesh her again within the 30 days, v'chazra ba, and then she retracts, she says she doesn't want the kiddushin, ma, what would be the halacha in that situation? And Rashi explains, v'chazra ba b'sochlam, and she is chozer, she retracts within the 30 days, Amra efshi b'hen, she says, I don't want it, I don't want the kiddushin. So again, mahu, what's the halacha? Rabbi Yochanan says, chozeres, she's able to retract, the kiddushin therefore is not going to be chal. Asi dibor umevatel dibor, meaning her speech, her words can come, and they can be mevatel her previous words. One dibor can be mevatel another dibor, according to Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish says, Eina chozer, she's not able to retract at this point in time. Lo asi dibor umevatel dibor, her dibor is not able to come along and be mevatel the previous acceptance of the kiddushin. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei, we have the following question. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan, the Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan asks Reish Lakish the following question. Bita, let's let's say you have a situation where he's mevatel. This is talking here about somebody sends a shliach to take off truma, so then he nullifies that shlichus. Imad shelo taram bitel, if he nullifies the shlichus before the truma was taken, ein truma so truma. So then the truma is not going to be an effective truma. And so Rabbi Yochanan asks Reish Lakish, v'hacha, but over here, the dibur v'dibur, who here also it was a speech and then another speech, meaning he first appointed him with words to take off truma, and then he retracted it with words as well. V'ka'asi dibur mevatel dibur. You see that one dibur is coming and is nullifying another dibur. Exactly, says Rabbi Yochanan, like I'm saying, and it's a question on Reish Lakish. And the Gemara answers on behalf of Reish Lakish, Shani nesinas mos liadisha. It's different in the case of the Kiddushin, where money was actually given to the woman, because there it's not simply a dibur, there's an action involved as well. V'loasi dibur mevatel maisa. Therefore, the dibur later can't come along and nullify the maisa. Meaning to say, Reish Lakish admits that in the case of truma, it is true. One dibur is being mevatel a dibur, but when Reish Lakish said the dibur is not mevatel dibur, that was talking about in the case of Kiddushin, where there's also a maisa, there's also an action that is involved. And Rashi explains bitel emad shelo taram bitel. Again, it said that let's say he nullified the shliach if he did that before the truma was taken. Haomer l'shluchot seyu trom. Again, a person says to a shliach, "Go take off truma v'chazeru bitlo milios shlucho," and he's mevatel him from being the shliach. O b'fanav o shelo b'fanav, whether in front of him or not in front of him. So in that case, again, we said that he's able to be mevatel the shlichus. And the Gemara answered on behalf of Reish Lakish, the chimaisa damu, here it's like an action. Now, even though the action wasn't chal immediately, have a maisa mio lochal achar shloshim. It's a maisa that's going to be chal after 30 days. V'had kari le dibor. Now, the reason why it's referred to as a dibor, mishum delav maisa mamishu, because it's not really a full maisa over here. It really is it's in between a dibor and a maisa. And again, that's why Reish Lakish says it can't be mevatel over here. One dibor can't come and be mevatel this other dibor, which is somewhat of a maisa, and Rabbi Yochanan says it is able to be mevatel in this case. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei, we have another question, Hashaleach get l'ishto. Let's say a person sends a get to his wife, v'higia b'shliach, and then he reaches the shliach, o shesholach achrav shliach, or let's say he sends another shliach after the shliach, v'yomar lo, and he says to him, get shenasati lach batel, the get that I gave you, it is nullified, harei zeh batel. So in that case, it is considered to be a good nullification. Again, it seems to support the position of Reish Lakish. You have a bittel, you have a nullification over here. V'hanesinas get liad shliach, and the Gemara says, when you give a get to the shliach, techinasinas mostly arisha dami. That's similar. There's a little bit of an action as well, similar to giving money to the woman. V'katani hareza batel. And what does it say over here? It says that it is in fact nullified. And so again, you see a proof to Rabbi Yochanan. It's a question on Reish Lakish. And the Gemara answers, Hasam Nami over there also, Kal Kamadalomata Gita Liyada. If the get hasn't actually reached her hand, Dibor v'Diborhu, it's actually not considered a Maisa, it's just considered words and words. Asi Dibor Mevatel Dibor. So again, Reish Lakish admits that a Dibor can be Mevatel a Dibor. It's only in our case of Kiddushin where it is somewhat of a Maisa that there's not able to be Bittel according to Reish Lakish. And Rashi explains, V'higia b'shliach, again, he reaches the shliach, Ribusa Ashmin, and this is a chiddush. The point is, even though he didn't pursue the shliach for this purpose, but still, he just happened to meet him. V'yamar lo harei batel, and he says it's nullified. V'lo amrin l'tziyura bi'alma kamachav. We don't say he's just trying to make trouble. We don't say that. We say that it's nullified. V'hachi mefureshes beperak hasholeach. That's explained in perak hasholeach. And the Gemara then said, Kol kamadalo mata gita liyad ha'isha lav midihu. If the get has not reached the woman, that's nothing. That's not something that we would refer to as a maisa. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish this time asking a question. Reish Lakish asks the following question to Rabbi Yochanan. Kol ha'kelim yordan lidei tumasim v'machshava. The halach is that when it comes to kelim, so they can be mekabel tumah with thought alone. The idea here is that you have a thought in your mind that this is a complete kli. You're not planning on refining the vessel any further. Ve'ein olamidei tumasim, but they can't come up from their tumah. The tumah is not removed. Ela b'shinoi ma'isa. Only if there's an actual action, if there's some actual physical change in the vessel. And Rashi explains, Yarden lidei tuma b'machshava, kagon golme kelim damar ba'kol shochten kol sha'asid, loshuf, l'shavetz, l'garer, u'l'garer. These are all different actions that a person would take in order to refine a vessel. V'yamar hasam, it says over there, da'akati chesron malachahu, that if you still have work to do on the keli, so it's lacking in work, u'tahorim, it's still tar, it has to be a final product, it has to be considered a kli in order to be makabel tumah. V'imchishav aleh shalo loshuf, v'shalo l'shavetz, but let's say the person has a thought in his mind, he's not going to refine this kli any further. That's considered through thought alone. It's considered gemar melacha. It's considered complete, and it can be makabel tumah. That's what it means. It's a yordin lidei tumah with machshava. However, vein olan mitumas and mishakiblu. Let's say it already received tumah. It's already tameh, and it's now you want it that it should leave and it should become pure. It should no longer be considered a kli. So their machshava is not going to work. You need maisa. Ela b'shinoi maisa. You need to have an actual physical change. Sheyasa b'maisa lekalkulam sheyishabrem or yanakvim. You have to ruin the kli in some way, break it, put a hole in it. Then it's no longer going to be considered a kli, and it will be pure. And Rashi says, v'chein, and similarly, ad shelo yikablu tumah. This also applies, let's say, it did not yet contract any tumah. Ein olin mitoras kabbalas tumah. Sheyardu b'machshava. Let's say it was ready to receive tumah, because you had a thought that the vessel was complete, and now you want that it's not going to be able to be makabel tumah, to say it's not complete. Machshava is not going to be enough for that. You can't just decide you want to refine it further at that point in time, because you've already decided it's a kli. Ela b'shinoi maisa. But if you do some kind of physical action, and you start refining it, so then it shows it's not complete. When you start to scrape away at the kli, when you start to refine the kli, so then already that's considered that it's no longer a kli, because now it's clear that there's further refinements that will happen to the kli, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Tes Amid Beis.